Welcome back to ClearPath Conversations, the podcast where customer journeys find direction. I'm Mark Bernardin, and if this is your first time here, I've spent over a decade in customer success roles across cybersecurity SaaS. I've written books about this work. I've trained teams. I've turned red accounts green, and I've built ClearPath CX because I got tired of seeing CSM struggle with the same problems that I did. Today's episode is one I've been wanting to do since day one. It's called, What Does a CSM Actually Do? Spoiler alert, it's not what the job description says. It's not what your onboarding deck promised. It's not what some LinkedIn thought leader thinks you should be doing. I'm talking about what the job really looks like. Day to day, call to call, quarter to quarter. And whether you're brand new to the role or 10 years in, I think you'll find this breakdown refreshing, validating, and probably uncomfortably accurate. So let's get into it. Let's start with the obvious problem. Most CSM job descriptions are terrible. They're Frankenstein documents. They're mathematically impossible, but they're half sales, half support, and half product management. And somehow they still leave out what you actually do. Now, you've probably seen the greatest hits. Own the customer relationship, drive adoption and value realization, be a strategic partner, collaborate cross-functionally, deliver white glove service. Okay, what does that even mean? Does owning the relationship mean you own support tickets? Do you own renewals? Are you expected to solve churn, drive expansion, and still be everyone's favorite person? Here's the truth. Nobody really defines this job well. And that's why so many CSMs feel overwhelmed, under-resourced, and constantly reactive. So today, I'm going to walk you through what I believe are the 5 real jobs of a CSM, based on experience, not theory. These are the roles I've had to step into day after day, managing accounts like Lowe's, Home Depot, Ernst & Young, Accenture, and others across cybersecurity and SaaS portfolios. And I'm going to talk about what isn't your job, and why clarity is your greatest asset, and what it looks like to be a CSM who actually leads, even if you don't have the title. So, let's go. The first role, role number 1, is the translator. Your first job is to translate. Now, not languages, though that might be helpful sometimes, but rather expectations. You translate internal goals into customer outcomes. You translate customer feedback into product insight. You translate vague executive directions into actual workflows. You are the bridge between sales and support, between product and the user, between what we sold them and what they're actually doing. For example, when I took over the Ernst & Young account, there was already tension. Expectations had been set poorly during the sales cycle. We had overpromised, we had underclarified, and now the customer was frustrated because they thought they were getting something that we never actually offered. So I stepped in and translated. I explained what we could offer, what was actually in scope, and what was aspirational. And I reset the relationship around clarity instead of confusion. That's the translator role. And if you don't play it, someone else will, and they probably won't do it as well. Now, role number 2 is the stabilizer, because CSMs are also stabilizers. You're the calm voice in the chaos. You're the one who doesn't panic during a churn threat. You're the one who doesn't throw support under the bus when something breaks. You're the one who keeps the customer conversation steady even when things are falling apart behind the scenes. One of my favorite compliments came from a colleague who said, "You don't just take the temperature, you change it." That's what stabilizers do. When I was assigned to the Home Depot, it was a red account. They were frustrated, burned out, they were done with us. The internal guidance that I got was, quote, "Just don't make it worse." But I didn't accept that. I didn't go in with a script. I went in with structure. And over the next few weeks, we turned the temperature down. We got to neutral and then to engaged, eventually to green. That's the work of a stabilizer. You don't just manage the account, you manage the energy around it. The third role is the strategist, and this one's huge and often misunderstood. CSMs are not just relationship managers. You're not a glorified account concierge. You're a strategist. That means you plan, you map, you identify patterns, you anticipate problems before they become escalations. You're thinking 3 months ahead while you're managing today's fire drill. This is where your account success plans come in, your stakeholder maps, your health score frameworks, your quarterly objectives. When I managed the Lowe's account, I wasn't just responding to their requests. I was building a roadmap. I was tracking adoption metrics. I was identifying which stakeholders had an influence and which ones were just along for the ride. I was asking, what does success look like for them in 6 months? And what do we need to do this quarter to get them there? That's strategic thinking. And if you're not doing it, you're just reacting. And reaction leads to churn. And the fourth role is it's the firefighter, because let's be real, sometimes you're just putting out fires. Escalations happen, misalignment happens, surprise churn risks happen. A key stakeholder leaves, a product bug impacts their biggest use case, a renewal conversation goes sideways because sales made a promise that you can't keep. And when that happens, you're the firefighter. You assess the damage, you triage, you communicate clearly, you coordinate internally, and you keep the customer from walking away. At Palo Alto Networks, I took on multiple accounts that were already escalated. Some were at risk of churning, some had already churned and came back. My job wasn't to make them love us overnight. My job was to stop the bleeding, stabilize the relationship, rebuild trust, and then, only then, start moving them forward again. That's firefighting. It's not the whole job, but it is a critical part of it. And the best CSMs know how to fight the fire and prevent the next one. And the fifth role is the advocate. So finally, you're an advocate, but not just for the customer. Of course, you advocate for their needs internally. You push product to prioritize their feature requests. You push support to escalate their ticket. You push sales to honor what was sold, but you also advocate for your company. You protect scope. You reset unrealistic expectations. You push back when a customer asks for something that's out of bounds. Because here's the thing, advocacy isn't about saying yes to everything. It's about finding the right balance between customer satisfaction and customer sustainability. At Ernst & Young, I had to advocate hard for both sides. EY wanted more. They always wanted more, and sometimes it was fair, and sometimes it wasn't. So I learned to say things like, "I hear what you're asking for. Let me see what's possible, but here's what I can commit to today." And that's advocacy. You're not a pushover. You're not a blocker. You're a bridge between what's wanted and what's achievable. Okay, so those are the 5 roles. You're a translator, a stabilizer, a strategist, a firefighter, and an advocate. But here's what I want to address next. What CSMs think they own, but don't. Because this is where a lot of confusion and burnout happens. Now, let's clear this up. You don't own renewals if sales owns the contract. You influence them, you enable them, but you're not the one closing the deal. You don't own the product roadmap, even if your customers want features you can't deliver. You influence product, you advocate, but you don't control what gets built. You don't own support, even if you're expected to know every ticket, every bug, every workaround. You're not tier 1. Stop being treated like it. And here's the big one. You don't own the customer's success. You enable it, you guide it, you remove blockers, but ultimately, they have to do the work. If they won't adopt the product, won't engage with training, won't assign resources, that's on them. Your job is to make success possible, not guaranteed. And once you accept that, you'll stop burning out, trying to save accounts that don't want to be saved. And now here's the shift that changed everything for me. I stopped seeing myself as a helper. I started seeing myself as a leader. Even when I didn't have formal authority, even when I wasn't a manager, even when I was early in my career, because the truth is, leadership isn't about a title. It's about impact. It's about how you show up. Do you wait for someone to tell you what to do, or do you assess a situation and take action? Do you deflect blame, or do you take ownership and solve the problem? Do you react to fires, or do you prevent them? Don't wait for permission to lead. Just start leading and let them catch up. When you start acting like a leader, people will treat you like one. Your customers trust you more, your internal teams respect you more, and you start getting pulled into bigger conversations. That's the shift from helper to leader, from reactive to strategic, from just keeping the lights on to actually moving accounts forward. So, what does this actually look like day to day? Let me give you a snapshot of a typical week, I guess. 2 to 3 EBR preps. That can be pulling metrics, building decks, setting up alignment meetings with sales and products. And then you have one onboarding kickoff. So setting expectations, introducing the team, delivering the first win maybe. And then there could be 3 escalations in there. A product bug, a billing issue, angry stakeholder, for example. You could also be faced with 4 internal sync meetings, maybe with product support, the sales team, or your leadership. You also might have a health score rework because the old model just wasn't catching your risk signals early enough. And then on top of all that, you have 6 hours of chasing alignment behind the scenes. That could be in emails, Slack pings, status updates, and playing calendar Tetris. That's your typical week. It's not sexy. It's not always visible, but it's strategic. Because all that invisible work, that's what makes everything visible when it counts. When you walk into that EBR and it goes flawlessly, it's because you did the prep. When your customer doesn't churn, it's because you saw the risk early and mitigated it. When your internal teams actually follow through, it's because you built relationships and communicated clearly. That's the work. I live by this rule. Proactive feels like overkill until reactive feels like drowning. When things are calm, it's tempting to skip the run books, to put off the sentiment calls, to think, I'll skip that recap email until later. But later never comes. And then the escalation hits, the stakeholder leaves, the renewal goes sideways. And suddenly, you're drowning, trying to piece together what happened, who said what, and why no one saw it coming. The run books, that's proactive. Sentiment calls, proactive. Recap emails, nudges, follow-ups, all proactive. And that's the work that makes leadership say, we trust this person. That's the work that makes the customers say, they actually get us. That's the work that turns a customer success manager from fine to indispensable. So don't skip it. Don't undervalue it. And don't let anyone tell you that it doesn't matter. Because it's literally the difference between churn and renewal. Now, let's talk about tools for a second. You don't need a massive tech stack to be a great CSM, but you do need a few things. First, your account success plan template. If you don't have one, reach out to me. I'll send you one. You need a CS platform like Gainsight, PlanHat. Even a well-structured spreadsheet can serve the purpose. Also, you need some recap emails. Seriously, this is the most underrated tool in customer success. You also need a customer communication audit so you can track sentiment, not just tickets. And finally, you need a stakeholder tracker. You need to know who's engaged, who's checked out, and who has the power. These aren't fancy. They're just effective. And if you're not using them, you're making your job harder than it needs to be. So let's bring this home. This job is not about doing everything. It's about knowing which problems matter and solving them before they explode. CSMs aren't note takers, we're navigators. We are not admin assistants, we're strategic operators. We are not firefighters by default, we are architects who occasionally have to grab a hose. And the best ones, they give a damn. They don't just show up, they lead. They don't just react, they plan. They don't just keep accounts alive, they help them thrive. That's the job. And if you're doing it right, it's hard. It's messy. And it's invisible half the time. But it's also one of the most impactful roles in SaaS. Because when you get it right, customers stay. They grow. They advocate. And they remember you. Not because you were perfect, but because you cared. Now, in the next episode, we're going to be diving into how to prioritize your accounts, especially when you're handed a portfolio with no segmentation, no context, and no time to figure it all out. But until then, grab the companion checklist for this episode. It's out on clearpathcx.com. Follow the podcast so you don't miss any episodes or what's next, and also connect with me out on LinkedIn. And if this episode helped clarify the chaos even a little, drop me a message. I'd love to hear from you. I read every single message. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work. And thank you for being the kind of CSM who gives a damn. I'll talk to you soon.